The boardroom felt like a freezer that Tuesday morning in Chicago, all polished marble and floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the bustling Michigan Avenue below. Rachel Martinez clutched her worn leather portfolio, the one she'd carried through 15 years of manufacturing excellence, filled with handwritten process diagrams and efficiency charts that had saved the company millions. She expected another routine quarterly review, maybe some praise for last month's production breakthrough that reduced waste by 30%. Instead, she walked into an execution. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. Derek Hoffman stood at the head of the conference table, his perfectly pressed suit catching the morning light as he tapped his tablet. The wall-mounted screen flickered to life, displaying a single slide in corporate blue and white. Legacy Workforce Optimization, Rachel Martinez. Her name sat there like a death sentence, clinical and final. Rachel's coffee cup trembled in her hand as the words sank in. 15 years of perfect attendance, innovation awards, and late-night problem-solving reduced to 2 words on a sterile presentation slide. Our manufacturing philosophy has evolved beyond traditional approaches, Derek announced, his voice carrying that artificial enthusiasm reserved for quarterly earnings calls. We're implementing cutting-edge automation solutions that eliminate human error and outdated manual processes. His eyes swept the room, carefully avoiding Rachel's stunned face. Legacy methods, no matter how well-intentioned, simply cannot compete with modern efficiency standards. The other department heads shifted uncomfortably in their chairs. Maria from Quality Control, who had worked alongside Rachel for a decade, stared down at her notepad. Tom from Logistics, who had personally thanked Rachel last month for solving a critical supply chain bottleneck, suddenly found his phone fascinating. They all knew Rachel's value, but corporate restructuring had a way of making cowards out of champions. Rachel felt the familiar burn of injustice rise in her chest, but her face remained composed. She had learned long ago that in corporate America, showing emotion was like bleeding in shark-infested waters. She made a single mark in her portfolio, just a small dot next to today's date, and set her pen down with deliberate precision. Derek continued his presentation, slides full of buzzwords and projected savings, never once mentioning the weekend Rachel had worked through a hurricane to keep production running, or the innovative quality control system she'd developed that became the industry standard. Questions? Derek asked, though his tone suggested he didn't actually want any. The room remained silent except for the distant hum of traffic 30 floors below. Rachel closed her portfolio, the leather worn smooth by years of dedication, and stood up slowly. "Thank you for the clarity," she said, her voice steady as bedrock. She walked out of that glass cage with her head high, knowing that while they saw a relic being retired, she carried something they couldn't imagine, the blueprints for their downfall. The elevator ride to the ground floor felt eternal, each floor marking another second of her old life slipping away. But as the doors opened to the bustling lobby, Rachel wasn't thinking about endings. She was thinking about the patents she'd filed under her consulting company, the innovative processes they'd dismissed as old-fashioned, and the quiet satisfaction of watching arrogance meet its match. They had just made the biggest mistake in corporate history, and they didn't even know it yet. The autumn wind cut through downtown Chicago as Rachel walked the familiar streets, her portfolio tucked under her arm like a secret weapon. She passed the coffee shop where she'd sketched her first efficiency improvement on a napkin, the office supplies store where she'd bought her first patent application forms, the small notary office where she'd quietly protected her innovations year after year. Each step took her further from the corporate tower that had just expelled her, and closer to a reckoning 15 years in the making. Her apartment overlooking Lake Michigan had never felt more like home. Rachel set her keys on the kitchen counter and let the silence wash over her. The severance packet crinkled in her hands. Transition assistance package, printed in friendly corporate fonts, as if they were doing her a favor. 14 pages of legal language designed to erase 15 years of excellence, complete with a non-disclosure agreement that might as well have been labeled, "Shut up and disappear." But Rachel had never been good at staying quiet, especially when she was right. She walked to her home office, a converted bedroom where the walls were lined with filing cabinets and technical manuals. Her cat Oliver brushed against her legs, purring as if he understood that something significant was about to unfold. "They think I'm obsolete," she whispered, scratching behind his ears. "Let's show them what obsolete really looks like." Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The filing cabinet in the corner held her real treasure, a thick folder labeled Martinez Manufacturing Solutions, LLC. Inside were 12 patents, each one filed under her consulting company name, each one notarized and time-stamped with military precision. She had started filing them her third year on the job, after watching the company take credit for her waste reduction system without so much as a thank you. Every breakthrough she'd made, every process improvement that had saved them millions, was legally protected under her name. Rachel spread the patents across her desk like a winning poker hand. Method for dynamic supply chain optimization. Advanced quality control protocol for manufacturing efficiency. Waste reduction through predictive maintenance systems. Each document represented months of unpaid overtime, weekends spent perfecting systems while her colleagues watched football, late nights solving problems that seemed impossible to everyone else. The company had benefited from every innovation, never suspecting that their legacy employee had been building an empire of intellectual property in her spare time. Her computer hummed to life, revealing folders full of documentation she'd meticulously collected over the years. Screenshots of internal emails where her suggestions were implemented without credit. Time-stamped photos of her handwritten process flows that later appeared in company presentations under Derek's name. Video recordings of training sessions where she explained systems that were then rebranded as modern innovations. She had been the silent architect of their success, and they had just fired the only person who truly understood how their operation worked. The lake outside her window reflected the city lights like scattered diamonds, beautiful and cold. Rachel opened the severance packet one more time, reading through the corporate speak and legal threats. They were offering her 6 months of salary and benefits in exchange for her silence and a promise never to compete with their business. The irony was delicious. They were paying her to go away, not realizing she already owned the foundation their entire operation was built on. She pulled out her phone and scrolled through her contacts, stopping at Elena Rodriguez, the patent attorney who had helped her file every application over the years. Elena had always been impressed by Rachel's foresight, joking that she planned like a chess grandmaster while everyone else was playing checkers. Now it was time to see just how far ahead Rachel had really been thinking. "Elena, it's Rachel Martinez. Remember those patents we filed over the years? It's time to use them." The attorney's response was immediate and enthusiastic. "I've been waiting for this call for 12 years. Let's discuss strategy tomorrow morning." Rachel hung up and looked around her quiet apartment, feeling the weight of 15 years of preparation settling into place. They had underestimated her completely, treating her like a relic when she was actually a time bomb they had been sitting on without realizing it. The next morning brought news that made Rachel's coffee taste even better than usual. Derek had called an emergency meeting to announce the implementation of their new revolutionary manufacturing system, a system that was built entirely on Rachel's patented processes. He was literally broadcasting his own theft to the entire company, complete with PowerPoint slides that featured her innovations rebranded with sleek graphics and modern terminology. The hubris was breathtaking, and it was all being documented in real time. Rachel's former colleague Maria sent her screenshots from the presentation, along with a message that said simply, "This is all your work, isn't it?" Quote, the slides were unmistakable. Her waste reduction protocols, her quality control systems, her supply chain optimizations, all presented as groundbreaking new technology developed by Derek's consulting team. He was taking credit for 15 years of her innovation while simultaneously claiming she was too outdated to contribute to the modern workplace. The beautiful thing about arrogance is how thoroughly it documents itself. Derek wasn't just stealing her work, he was creating a perfect paper trail of his theft, complete with timestamps and company-wide distribution. Every email he sent, every presentation he gave, every interview he conducted about the revolutionary new systems was another piece of evidence in the case that was building around him like a trap he couldn't see. Rachel spent the day organizing her evidence, cross-referencing Derek's claims with her patent filings, building a timeline that would be impossible to dispute. The man who had called her outdated was about to learn that some things never go out of style, like intellectual property law, thorough documentation, and the quiet satisfaction of watching karma work its magic. She had spent 15 years building this moment, one patent application at a time, and now it was finally time to collect on her investment. The phone calls started that afternoon. Elena had begun the process, and word was spreading through the legal community faster than gossip in a small town. "Rachel," Elena said, her voice tight with excitement, "this is the cleanest case of intellectual property theft I've seen in 20 years. They didn't just cross the line, they built a monument on the other side of it." The cease and desist letter was already being drafted, a polite but devastating piece of legal artillery that would land on Derek's desk within hours. As the sun set over Lake Michigan, Rachel stood at her window watching the lights come alive across the city. Somewhere out there, Derek was probably celebrating his brilliant presentation, basking in praise for innovations he had never understood, let alone created. But his celebration was about to be cut short by the sound of his own arrogance crashing down around him. Rachel had been patient, quiet, and strategic for 15 years. Now it was time to be loud, and the sound was going to be deafening. The trap was set, the evidence was overwhelming, and the reckoning was about to begin. They had called her a relic, a legacy employee who couldn't adapt to modern times. But as Rachel prepared for the battle ahead, she knew the truth. She wasn't stuck in the past. She had been building the future they were about to lose. The quiet woman they had underestimated was about to teach them the most expensive lesson in corporate history, and the education was going to cost them everything they thought they had earned. The cease and desist letter arrived at Hoffman Industries on a Thursday morning, delivered by courier in a cream envelope that looked deceptively innocent. Derek was in the middle of his weekly leadership meeting, basking in compliments about his revolutionary manufacturing breakthrough, when his assistant knocked and handed him the envelope with trembling fingers. The moment he broke the seal and saw the letterhead from Rodriguez and Associates, Intellectual Property Law, his face went white as winter. Rachel watched from her apartment as her phone lit up with messages from former colleagues. The news was spreading through the company like wildfire. Derek had suddenly canceled all afternoon meetings and locked himself in his office with the legal team. The manufacturing floor, which had been buzzing with excitement about the new systems just hours earlier, was now quiet with the kind of tension that comes before major announcements. Workers huddled in small groups, whispering about rumors of patent violations and potential lawsuits. Maria texted a photo from inside the building. Derek's office blinds were drawn, and through the gaps, she could see him pacing frantically, while 3 lawyers sat around his conference table with thick folders spread before them. "He's been on the phone with corporate headquarters for 2 hours, Maria wrote. "Something big is happening." Rachel smiled, imagining the conversations taking place behind those closed doors. The frantic research into patent databases, the growing realization that they had built their entire future on stolen ground. The legal letter had been surgical in its precision, citing each of Rachel's 12 patents by number and filing date, with detailed explanations of how Derek's innovations violated her intellectual property. Elena had included screenshots from Derek's own presentations, highlighted sections from company emails, and timestamped documentation that made the theft undeniable. The letter concluded with a demand for immediate cessation of all infringing activities and a warning that federal litigation would commence within 72 hours if compliance was not achieved. By evening, Rachel's phone was ringing with calls from industry contacts who had heard whispers about Hoffman Industries' legal troubles. The manufacturing world was smaller than most people realized, and news of potential patent violations traveled fast among engineers and production managers. "Rachel, is it true you've got patents on their new systems?" asked David Chen, a former colleague who now worked for a competing firm. If so, this could shut down their entire operation. Rachel had spent years watching Derek take credit for her innovations, sitting silently through meetings where her ideas were rebranded and resold as his vision. She had endured performance reviews where he criticized her resistance to change, while simultaneously implementing her suggestions. She had been passed over for promotions in favor of consultants who barely understood the processes she had created. But every slight, every dismissal, every moment of being overlooked had taught her patience and strategic thinking. The beauty of her position was its simplicity. She owned the intellectual property rights to every major system Derek had implemented. The waste reduction protocols that had saved the company millions? Patented under Martinez Manufacturing Solutions LLC 3 years ago. The quality control innovations that had eliminated defective products? Filed and notarized 2 years before Derek was even hired. The supply chain optimizations that had streamlined their entire operation? Protected under federal patent law since Rachel's 5th year with the company. Friday morning brought the first crack in Derek's facade. Rachel received a forwarded email from someone inside the company. Derek had sent a company-wide message announcing a, quote, temporary pause in implementation of new manufacturing protocols pending routine IP verification procedures. The corporate speak couldn't hide the panic underneath. He was trying to buy time while his lawyers scrambled to find a way out of the trap he had walked into with such confidence. The stock market noticed immediately. Hoffman Industries' share price dropped 4% at opening, then continued sliding as word spread about potential intellectual property disputes. Industry analysts began asking questions about the company's recent claims of revolutionary innovation, and financial reporters started digging into the background of their manufacturing improvements. The story Derek had been so eager to tell was becoming a liability with each passing hour. Rachel's apartment felt different now. Not like a refuge from corporate politics, but like the command center of an operation that was proceeding exactly as planned. She had always been a methodical person, the kind who checked her work twice and kept detailed records of everything. Those habits, which Derek had mocked as old-fashioned and inefficient, were now the foundation of an ironclad legal case that was dismantling his career piece by piece. Elena called with updates throughout the day. Their legal team is scrambling, she reported. They've requested an emergency meeting for Monday, which tells me they know exactly how exposed they are. Rachel, in 25 years of practice, I've never seen a cleaner case of intellectual property theft. They didn't just use your ideas. They built their entire strategic plan around them and then documented every step of the process. The weekend brought a flurry of activity that Rachel observed from the comfortable distance of her Lakeview apartment. Industry blogs picked up the story, with headlines like, Manufacturing Giant Faces Patent Challenge, and Innovation or Imitation? Companies' New Systems Under Legal Scrutiny. The articles were careful not to name specific individuals, but anyone in the industry could read between the lines and understand what was happening. Derek's social media presence, which had been full of self-congratulatory posts about modern leadership and innovative thinking, went suddenly silent. His LinkedIn profile, previously updated daily with insights about manufacturing excellence, hadn't seen new content since Thursday. The man who had built his reputation on taking credit for other people's work was learning what happened when the actual creators decided to speak up. Monday morning arrived with the kind of crisp autumn air that made Chicago feel alive with possibility. Rachel dressed carefully for her meeting with Elena and the opposing legal team. Not the worn work clothes she had favored at the factory, but a sharp business suit that reminded everyone in the room that she was not just a displaced employee, but the CEO of her own intellectual property company. She carried her portfolio, now reinforced with legal documents and patent certificates, like the arsenal it had always been. The law offices of Rodriguez and Associates occupied an entire floor of a downtown skyscraper, with conference rooms that looked out over the city like observation decks. Rachel sat at one end of a polished mahogany table, Elena beside her, while Derek and 3 corporate lawyers huddled at the other end. The man who had dismissed her as outdated couldn't make eye contact, his usual confidence replaced by the nervous energy of someone who finally understood the magnitude of his mistake. Let's be clear about the situation, Elena began, spreading Rachel's patents across the table like evidence at a crime scene. Ms. Martinez holds 12 federal patents covering every major system your company has implemented in the past year. Your client has not only violated these patents but has done so publicly, creating extensive documentation of willful infringement. The corporate lawyers shuffled through their own papers, searching for arguments that didn't exist. Derek's lead attorney, a man named Harrison who looked like he charged by the minute, attempted damage control. Our client was unaware of any existing patents and believed these systems were developed independently by his consulting team. Elena smiled the kind of smile that made opposing counsel nervous. Mr. Hoffman's own emails contradict that claim. We have documentation showing he was aware of Ms. Martinez's previous work and specifically instructed his team to modernize her approaches. The meeting lasted 3 hours, with Derek's legal team becoming increasingly desperate as each argument was systematically dismantled. They tried claiming the patents were invalid, only to be shown the extensive documentation and prior art that supported each filing. They attempted to argue fair use, which collapsed when confronted with the commercial scale of the infringement. They even suggested that Rachel's employment agreement gave the company rights to her innovations, until Elena produced her consulting contract showing she had retained all intellectual property rights. Rachel spoke only once during the entire proceeding, when Harrison suggested that her patents were too broad and would never hold up in federal court. "Mr. Harrison," she said, her voice carrying the quiet authority of someone who had spent 15 years perfecting her craft. "I didn't file broad patents. I filed specific, detailed patents that describe exactly the processes your client is using. The reason they're so comprehensive is because I'm the one who created these systems, and I understand them better than anyone else in this room." The silence that followed was profound. Derek stared at the table, perhaps finally understanding that the woman he had dismissed as a relic was actually the architect of everything he had built his reputation on. His lawyers exchanged glances that spoke volumes about their assessment of the case. Elena presented the settlement terms: immediate cessation of all infringing activities, public acknowledgement of Rachel's innovations, and licensing fees for any future use of her patented systems. As the meeting concluded, Rachel felt a sense of completion that had nothing to do with revenge and everything to do with justice. She had not set out to destroy Derek's career, but she had refused to let him destroy her legacy. The patents she had filed weren't weapons. They were shields, protecting the value of innovation and ensuring that credit went where it was due. The fact that Derek had chosen to test those protections was his decision, not hers. The walk back to her car took Rachel through the heart of downtown Chicago, past the manufacturing district where she had spent 15 years perfecting processes that were now recognized as industry-leading innovations. The buildings looked different now, not like monuments to corporate indifference, but like places where real work happened, where problems were solved by people who understood that true innovation came from patience, observation, and the willingness to try new approaches when others insisted on old mistakes. The resolution came faster than anyone expected. By Thursday, Hoffman Industries had agreed to all of Elena's terms, rather than face federal litigation that would have been both expensive and public. Derek's revolutionary manufacturing systems were officially licensed from Martinez Manufacturing Solutions, LLC, with Rachel's name appearing in all company documentation as the original inventor. The licensing fees alone were enough to fund her consulting business for the next decade. The industry publications that had covered the initial controversy now ran follow-up stories with headlines like "Veteran Engineers' Patents Vindicate Innovation Claims" and "The Importance of Recognizing Workplace Inventors." Rachel's phone rang constantly with job offers, consulting requests, and speaking engagements. The woman Derek had called outdated was suddenly the most in-demand manufacturing expert in the Midwest. But the real victory wasn't the money or the recognition. It was the validation that her approach to innovation had been right all along. While others chased trends and buzzwords, Rachel had focused on solving real problems with practical solutions. While consultants presented flashy PowerPoints, she had been filing patents that protected the value of genuine invention. While Derek built his reputation on borrowed ideas, she had been building a foundation that couldn't be shaken by corporate politics or management changes. The final meeting took place in Elena's office on a snowy December morning, 3 months after that first cease and desist letter had arrived at Hoffman Industries. Rachel signed the last of the licensing agreements, officially establishing her patents as the foundation of what was now acknowledged as the most efficient manufacturing system in the industry. Derek had been quietly reassigned to a different division, his dreams of innovation glory replaced by the reality of middle management obscurity. Rachel's new consulting firm occupied a small office overlooking Lake Michigan, with a view that reminded her daily of how far she had traveled from that humiliating Tuesday morning in Derek's conference room. Her walls were decorated not with corporate awards or motivational posters, but with framed copies of her 12 patents, proof that innovation belonged to those who created it, not those who claimed credit for it. The snow fell softly outside her window as Rachel reviewed proposals from 3 different companies seeking her expertise. Each offer represented more money than she had ever made as an employee, along with the kind of respect that couldn't be taken away by management restructuring or corporate politics. She had built something that belonged entirely to her, protected by law and sustained by the quality of her work, rather than the whims of executives who confused presentation skills with actual innovation. Her cat Oliver jumped onto her desk, purring as he settled beside her laptop. "What do you think?" she asked him, scratching behind his ears. "Should we help them solve their manufacturing problems?" Oliver's purr deepened, and Rachel smiled. She had spent 15 years being underestimated, overlooked, and undervalued. Now she was exactly where she belonged, in control of her own destiny, with her innovations properly credited and protected, ready to help others, while ensuring she never again had to watch someone else take credit for her life's work. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.